Divide in August and watch them spread forever. That crowded perennial you've been staring at all summer? Don't pull it out. Don't throw it away. And definitely don't spend money replacing it. Dig it up, split it, replant it. Because one established clump can become 3, 4, even 6 new plants. And those new plants can keep expanding year after year. Picture what happens when you do this with the right perennials. One giant iris becomes a whole row of iris. One crowded daylily becomes a sweeping mass of blooms. One hosta becomes several shade-loving plants. One patch of bee balm becomes a hummingbird magnet in another part of the yard. And the crazy part is, August is when many gardeners are completely missing this opportunity. The flowers may be fading, the garden may look tired, but underground, the story is completely different. The soil is warm, established plants have already built up their energy, and the right divisions can spend the remaining weeks of the season establishing roots before winter. You're not planting more, you're multiplying what you already own. But there's a catch. Not all perennials divide the same way. Some need their crowns split. Some need their rhizomes separated. Some give you young runners around the outside. And one plant on this list requires you to work with its roots in a completely different way. Get the timing and technique right, and that one plant you've had for years can become the beginning of an entirely new garden. So let's get into the 11 perennials you should be looking at in August, starting with the one that can turn a single crowded clump into a whole army of plants. And stay until the end because I'm also giving you 3 simple August division rules that can make the difference between divisions that take off and divisions that struggle. But before we dive into today's video, I have a major announcement. The gardening guide you've been writing to me about for months is finally here. The Plant Once Garden digital ebook is officially out. You have been incredibly patient with me while I took the time to get this right. It is approximately 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, gathered into one complete downloadable reference, designed digitally with a hand-drawn heritage cover and warm cream pages that look and feel like a guide your grandmother would have owned. Inside, you'll find the 90 perennial plants that come back every year with almost no labor, 6 complete garden plans, the no-labor planting calendar, and the hydrogen peroxide method explained completely. I've also included the specific perennials that bring hummingbirds singing and dancing right outside your window, the chapter on what your garden becomes over 20 years, and the mistakes that kill perennials. This is a reference you can lean on for the rest of your gardening life. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the pinned comment or description below to instantly download your copy. Thank you again for your patience. Now, back to the garden. Let's start with one of the most recognizable perennials you can divide in late summer. Number 1. Bearded Iris. Bearded iris, or Iris germanica, is one of those plants that can look spectacular for years and then suddenly start telling you it needs attention. You may notice fewer flowers, you may see a crowded clump, or you may discover that the center of the plant looks old while the vigorous growth is happening around the outside. That's your signal. The plant is producing new growth, and August can be an excellent time to separate those newer sections. Bearded iris grows from rhizomes rather than ordinary underground roots, and these rhizomes give you a very simple way to identify where the strongest new growth is. Start by lifting the clump carefully. Once you've exposed the rhizomes, look for the younger, healthier outer sections with active roots. Those are the pieces you want. Before replanting, trim the leaves back into a fan about 6 inches tall. Why? Because the plant has just lost part of its root system. Keeping a huge amount of foliage attached creates unnecessary water demand while those roots are getting established. Then separate the fresh outer rhizomes from the older center. The younger sections are generally the ones you want to prioritize. And here's something important. Don't bury bearded iris rhizomes deeply. The rhizome should sit very close to the soil surface, with sunlight able to reach it. Planting it too deeply is one of the easiest ways to create problems. Give each division space. Water it in thoroughly. Then let the warm soil help those roots establish. Imagine taking one crowded iris clump and turning it into several healthy plants along an entire garden edge. That's the power of division. You're not just maintaining the garden, you're multiplying it. Number 2. Daylilies. Next are daylilies, hemerocalis. If you've ever planted daylilies, you already know why they're so popular. They are tough, they tolerate a wide range of conditions, and once established, they can form enormous clumps. But eventually, even a tough plant can become overcrowded. The center may become less productive, the flowers may become less impressive, and the whole plant can start looking like one giant mass of leaves. That's when division becomes useful. August, particularly after the main bloom period in your area, can be a practical time to divide established daylily clumps. Dig around the entire root ball and lift it from the soil. Don't be surprised if the root system is much larger than you expected. Daylilies can create an impressive underground network. Once you've lifted the plant, remove excess soil. You can gently wash some soil away if necessary, so you can see where the fans connect. Then separate the fans. Some clumps will pull apart surprisingly easily. Others become so dense that you need more force. One useful technique for a very stubborn clump is placing 2 garden forks back to back in the crown and slowly levering them apart. This gives you control without repeatedly hacking through the entire root mass with a shovel. Make sure each division has healthy roots and several leafy fans. Then replant promptly, and don't make the mistake of leaving your new divisions sitting in the sun while you continue working. Remember our goal. We're reducing stress, not adding to it. A single mature daylily can potentially give you multiple new planting sections. That means the ugly, overcrowded clump you were thinking about replacing may actually be the source of your next garden expansion. Number 3. Yarrow. Now let's talk about a perennial that doesn't always need encouragement to spread. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Yarrow can be an incredible problem solver in the landscape. It's drought-tolerant, it's tough, and it can spread into a dense network of growth that helps cover bare ground. That makes it useful in areas where you want less exposed soil and fewer opportunities for weeds to take over. But that same spreading habit means established yarrow can become crowded. And when you want more plants, division is incredibly straightforward. Start by lifting a section of the plant. You don't necessarily need to destroy the entire colony. Instead, you can target healthy sections from the established root mass. Use a sharp trowel or spade to slice through the root runners. Your goal is to create smaller clumps that contain enough roots and shoots to establish independently. Then replant those pieces wherever you need coverage. Think of a bare strip along a pathway, a difficult slope, an area where the soil keeps drying out. Instead of buying several new plants, you can use divisions from the yarrow you already own. This is one of the biggest financial advantages of perennial gardening. The older your garden becomes, the more planting material it can produce. You stop treating the garden like something you constantly have to purchase. The garden starts producing for you, and that's exactly the philosophy behind a low-labor perennial landscape. Number 4. Hostas. Next up is the classic shade garden powerhouse, hostas. If you have a mature hosta that has become enormous, August division can turn that single plant into several shade-loving additions. And the reason hostas are so useful is simple. They can create beautiful, dense foliage where many other plants struggle. But when a hosta becomes extremely crowded, you may notice the center beginning to look less vigorous. That's when you can consider dividing it. Choose a cool, overcast day whenever possible. Dig around the entire clump and lift it carefully. Once the crown is exposed, use a sharp spade or serrated knife to cut vertically through the crown. Depending on the size of the plant, you can create 3 or 4 healthy sections. Don't make tiny pieces just because you can. Each division should have enough crown tissue and roots to establish properly. Then plant each section at roughly the same depth it was growing before. Water deeply, and keep the soil consistently moist while those new roots develop. Hostas are forgiving, but freshly divided hostas still need attention. And here's the transformation you can look forward to. Instead of having one massive hosta occupying one spot, you can create a repeated rhythm of hostas throughout a shade border. 1, 2, 3, 5. Suddenly the garden looks intentional, and you didn't have to buy 5 new plants. You divided 1. That's the kind of multiplication that makes a perennial garden increasingly valuable over time, and we're just getting started. Number 5. Black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susan, especially Rudbeckia fulgida, is another perennial that can become an excellent candidate for division once it has formed a mature clump. This is one of those plants that can completely change the appearance of a garden border. When it flowers, those golden blooms create a strong visual impact. But beneath the flowers, the plant is also building the root and crown structure that allows it to return year after year. Eventually, that clump can become crowded, and when you divide it, you're not simply creating more plants, you're also helping rejuvenate the original planting. Start by digging around the clump and lifting it carefully. A pitchfork can be useful because it allows you to loosen the root mass with a little more control. Once the plant is lifted, look for natural sections in the crown. Separate the root mass so that each division retains several leafy shoots and a healthy amount of roots. Don't leave the roots exposed for a long period. Have your new planting holes prepared before you begin. That way, you're moving from digging to replanting quickly. Water the divisions deeply after planting. And here's where August becomes important. You're not expecting the plant to put on a huge flowering display immediately. You're giving those new divisions time to establish themselves before the colder part of the year arrives. The goal is next season. You want those small sections to become strong, independent plants that can fill out the garden again. And if you already have black-eyed Susans spreading through your landscape, you may have more planting material than you realize. Number 6. Bee balm. Now let's move to a perennial that is famous for spreading. Bee balm monarda. Bee balm doesn't politely stay in one little circle forever. Once it becomes established, it can spread through underground growth and create a large colony. That's wonderful when you want a lush planting. It's less wonderful when the plant starts taking over the space around it. But August division gives you a way to turn that aggressive growth into something useful. Instead of fighting the plant, you can work with it. Dig around the outer perimeter of the colony. Those outside shoots are often younger and more vigorous than the older center. Look for sections that have healthy roots and active shoots. Separate those from the mother plant. Then replant them where you want another bee balm colony. The older woody center may be less desirable for propagation, so focus on those younger outer sections. And think about what this means for your garden. You can create another pollinator planting without buying another bee balm. You can establish a larger grouping, you can fill an empty section, or you can share divisions with another gardener. This is one of the reasons I love plants that spread. Their growth isn't just something to control, it's something you can use. But remember, bee balm can spread vigorously, so don't automatically plant every division. Place it where you actually want a larger colony. Otherwise, you may be back here next year asking how to divide it again. Number 7. Hardy geranium or cranesbill. Next is hardy geranium, commonly called cranesbill. And don't confuse these with the annual geraniums many people grow in containers. Hardy geraniums are dependable landscape perennials that can create excellent low-growing coverage. After flowering, some varieties can benefit from being cut back and divided. And August can provide a useful opportunity to create fresh plants from an established clump. Lift the root crown carefully. Then inspect the plant for natural sections. Some clumps can be pulled apart by hand. If the crown is too tight, use a hori-hori knife or another sharp garden tool to divide it into manageable sections. Again, don't obsess over creating the maximum number of plants. Create healthy plants. That's the better investment. A division with a good crown and sufficient roots has a much better chance of establishing than a tiny piece created simply because you wanted 10 plants instead of 5. Once planted, water thoroughly. Keep the soil from becoming bone dry while the roots are recovering. Then watch what happens. That little division that looks unimpressive in August can become a dense patch of foliage that suppresses weeds and fills empty ground in the following growing season. This is how a garden slowly becomes established. Not overnight, not through constant shopping, but through multiplication. Number 8. Creeping phlox and garden phlox. Now we have phlox, and depending on the type you grow, it may spread in a very different way. Creeping phlox can create mats where stems root as they contact suitable soil. Garden phlox, on the other hand, forms more upright clumps. But both can give you opportunities to create more plants. For creeping phlox, look underneath the mat. You may find sections where stems have already rooted. Those rooted sections can be separated from the mother plant. Use a sharp tool to sever the connection. Then lift the rooted section and move it to its new location. This is almost like harvesting a plant that has already done much of the propagation work for you. For clumping garden phlox, dig under the plant and lift the crown. Then divide the clump at the base into healthy sections. Make sure each division has enough roots and shoots to establish. And here's a simple way to think about phlox. Don't fight the way the plant naturally grows. Use its natural growth habit to your advantage. If it creeps, look for rooted stems. If it clumps, divide the crown. The result can be a much fuller planting without the expense of purchasing multiple mature plants. And if you've ever walked past a garden with a thick ribbon of flowering phlox and wondered how long it took to create that effect, remember this. It doesn't always start with dozens of plants. Sometimes it starts with one, then another, then another. That's the quiet power of perennials. By August, your garden can already contain the raw materials for next year's expansion. By the way, if you're looking to completely transform your yard into a low-maintenance paradise, don't forget that my full digital reference guide, The Plant Once Garden, is now officially available. It's a 150-page ebook covering all the perennial foundations and permanent setups we talk about on this channel. You can scan the QR code right here on the screen, or find the link in the pinned comment below to download your copy instantly. Now, let's get right back into today's topic. Because we still have 3 more perennials, and some of them have division methods you definitely don't want to get wrong. Number 9. Lady's Mantle. Lady's Mantle, Alchemilla mollis, is one of those plants that can make a garden look softer and more established. Its rounded, velvety foliage catches water droplets beautifully. And when planted along pathways, borders, or garden edges, it can create that lush, traditional garden appearance many people want. But once established, Lady's Mantle can form dense colonies, and after flowering fades, late summer can be an opportunity to lift and divide mature plants. Start by digging around the clump. Because older plants can become quite woody in the center, you want to expose enough of the crown to understand where the healthier sections are. Lift the plant, then divide it into smaller root bundles. The exact number of divisions depends on the size and condition of your plant. Again, don't chase numbers, chase healthy divisions. Plant those sections along walkways, around garden edges, or anywhere you want to create repeated foliage. This is one of those techniques that can completely change the economics of a garden project. Let's say you want to create a long border. Buying dozens of plants at once can become expensive, but if you already have established perennials, you can start with what you own. Divide, replant, let them establish, then divide again when they become mature enough. Over time, your garden becomes its own nursery. And that is a beautiful thing. Number 10. Astilbe. Next is Astilbe. Astilbe is especially valuable in gardens where you want color and texture in partially shaded conditions. But Astilbe isn't a plant you want to divide every year. In fact, mature plants generally need division only periodically. Every 3 to 4 years can be a useful general interval when the plant becomes crowded or starts declining in the center. If your Astilbe has been in the same location for years and you're seeing weaker growth, smaller flowers, or a dying center, it may be time. Dig deeply around the plant. Astilbe can develop a dense, sometimes woody crown. Once you've lifted it, use a sharp knife or spade to separate the crown. Each division should retain a healthy section of crown with several eyes and enough roots. Those eyes are important because they represent points from which new growth can develop. Don't make the sections too small. 2 or 3 good eyes per section is a useful target. Then replant immediately. Astilbe doesn't want to be sitting around with its roots exposed under the August sun. Water deeply after planting, and keep moisture consistent while the plant reestablishes. This is particularly important because Astilbe performs best when it doesn't repeatedly dry out. A freshly divided plant has fewer roots available to pull moisture from the soil. So your job is to make sure that root zone doesn't swing from saturated to bone dry. Give it steady moisture. Give it some protection from harsh afternoon conditions. And let it rebuild. Number 11. Oriental poppies. Now we reach the plant that makes this entire list especially interesting. Oriental poppies, Papaver orientale. If you've ever grown oriental poppies, you may have noticed something strange. They can put on an incredible spring display, then seem to disappear. The foliage fades. The plant enters a period of dormancy. And just when you think something went wrong, fresh basal growth begins appearing later in the season. That unusual growth cycle is one reason their division method is different from many of the other plants we've discussed. Instead of treating the plant like a simple fibrous-rooted clump, you need to understand that oriental poppies have long, substantial roots. So if you're dividing them, you need to dig deeply and carefully. Don't simply chop through the plant at the surface. Work underneath it and lift the root system. Then take healthy root sections. Segments around 3 to 4 inches can be used for propagation, depending on the plant and the condition of the root. The pieces are planted vertically, maintaining the correct orientation of the root. This is very different from dividing a hosta, very different from splitting a daylily, and very different from separating bee balm runners. That's why knowing what is happening underground matters. A garden may look simple above the soil, but underneath, every perennial has its own architecture. And if you learn that architecture, you stop guessing. You know where the new plant is coming from. You know what part needs to stay attached. You know how deep to plant, and you know why one method works for one perennial and fails for another. That's when gardening becomes much easier. You aren't memorizing random instructions. You're understanding the plant. And that's also why I want you to resist one very common August mistake. Don't divide everything simply because it's August. August can be a useful window for many established perennials, but your local conditions still matter. Extreme heat, drought, poor soil moisture, newly planted specimens, or plants already under stress are not ideal candidates. Division should be done when the plant is healthy enough to handle the disturbance and when you can provide the aftercare it needs. Remember, we're trying to multiply success, not multiply problems. So now let's talk about the 3 golden rules that apply to almost every August division project. Number 1. Pick cool, overcast days. This may be the simplest rule in the entire video. Don't divide your perennials in the middle of a scorching August afternoon if you can avoid it. Why? Because the moment you lift that plant from the ground, you've changed its relationship with water. The roots that were surrounded by moist soil are suddenly exposed, and the foliage is still losing water. That's a recipe for unnecessary stress. Instead, choose an early morning window or a cool, cloudy day. An overcast day is especially useful because the plant isn't being blasted by intense sunlight while its root system is being disturbed. You can also prepare everything before you start. Have your shovel ready. Have your knife or garden forks ready. Have the new planting holes prepared. Have water available. Have mulch ready. Don't dig up 10 plants and then spend an hour deciding where you're going to put them. Work efficiently. Lift, divide, replant, water, mulch. Then move to the next plant. And if the weather suddenly turns brutally hot, don't force it. Your garden will still be there. Number 2. Trim heavy foliage. This is especially important for plants like bearded iris and daylilies. When you divide a plant, you're reducing its root system. But if you leave an enormous amount of foliage attached, that foliage continues demanding water. The roots have fewer resources available to supply that demand. So reducing the foliage can help bring the plant back into balance. For irises, trimming the leaves into a fan around 6 inches tall is a classic example. For other plants, the amount of trimming depends on the species and its current condition. The goal isn't to butcher the plant. The goal is to reduce unnecessary water loss while the roots recover. Think about it this way. A mature plant has a large underground system supporting a large amount of foliage. When you divide it, you've suddenly created a smaller root system. So you want the top growth and root system to have a manageable relationship while the new roots develop. That's why trimming can be so helpful. And don't forget the difference between a plant that is naturally going dormant and a plant that is being stressed. You don't want to remove foliage simply because it looks untidy. You're making a deliberate decision to help a freshly divided plant recover. Number 3. Water deeply and mulch. This is where many successful divisions are made or lost. People do the digging correctly. They divide correctly. They replant correctly. And then they forget about the plants. Don't do that. Water the mother plant deeply about 24 hours before you plan to dig. This helps hydrate the plant before the disturbance. Then, after planting your new divisions, water them thoroughly. Don't just sprinkle the surface. You want moisture reaching the root zone. And for the first couple of weeks, pay attention to the weather and soil moisture. Fresh divisions are not established plants. They need time. If the weather is hot and dry, they may need frequent watering. The goal is to keep the developing root zone consistently moist without creating a permanently waterlogged environment. Then add a layer of mulch. Mulch helps reduce evaporation. It moderates soil temperature, and it can make it easier to maintain the moisture these new divisions need. But don't pile mulch directly against crowns or stems. Leave the plant breathing room. This is especially important for crown-forming perennials. Give the roots moisture, give the crown space, and give the plant time. Now let's put everything together. Think about the 11 plants we've covered: bearded iris, daylilies, yarrow, hostas, black-eyed Susan, bee balm, hardy geranium, creeping phlox or garden phlox, lady's mantle, astilbe, and oriental poppies. They don't all divide in exactly the same way, and that is the lesson. Bearded iris gives you rhizomes. Daylilies give you fans. Yarrow gives you spreading root sections. Hostas give you crown divisions. Black-eyed Susan gives you mature clumps. Bee balm gives you vigorous outer shoots. Hardy geranium gives you crown sections. Phlox can give you rooted stems or clump divisions. Lady's mantle gives you root bundles. Astilbe gives you crown sections with eyes. And oriental poppies give you specialized root cuttings. Once you understand those differences, division stops being intimidating. You start walking around your garden, looking underneath the surface. You see a crowded clump and don't immediately think, I need to replace this. You think, I wonder how many plants I can create from this. That's a completely different way of gardening, and it's one that saves money. It also saves time, because instead of constantly starting from zero, you build on what you already have. A perennial you planted 5 years ago can become 10 plants. Those 10 plants can eventually become 20, and those 20 can transform a border that once looked empty into something that feels mature and established. That is what a lush perennial landscape is really about. Not buying everything at once, building it over time, and August gives you an opportunity to accelerate that process. But there's one final thing I want you to remember. Don't measure success by how many divisions you make. Measure success by how many healthy plants you establish. It is much better to divide one mature plant into 4 strong sections than to force 12 tiny divisions that struggle. Quality first, healthy roots, healthy crowns, quick replanting, deep watering, and proper aftercare. That's the formula. And if you've been thinking about expanding your garden without dramatically increasing your workload, start looking at the plants you already own. Walk through your garden. Look for crowded clumps. Look for mature colonies. Look for plants that have clearly outgrown their current space. And ask yourself one simple question. Could this plant become 3? Maybe it can. Maybe it can become 5. Maybe it can become an entire new border. The garden you've been trying to create may already be sitting in your backyard. You just haven't multiplied it yet. And that's the beautiful part about perennial gardening. Every season isn't necessarily about starting over. Sometimes it's about taking what already works and making more of it. If you're ready to stop wasting time on plants that die every winter and finally build a garden that takes care of itself, don't forget to download your copy of the Plant Once Garden ebook. It's 150 pages of everything this channel teaches, completely mapped out for you. Just scan the QR code on your screen right now, or click the link in the description below to get your instant digital download. Thank you so much for watching. And the next time you walk through your garden in August and see an enormous perennial clump, Don't automatically reach for the garden center catalog. Reach for your shovel, because that one plant may be the beginning of an entire new landscape. I'll see you in the next video.